so I'll do my best for everyone also online to hear me, right? So my name is Jakub Tyc, as it was said already. I'm from the TU Wien, and I'm presenting our research outcomes in the name of Michael Hensel, who couldn't be with us here today. No? So, okay. Okay, right. It's a different perception here on the stage than everywhere else. Yeah, so Michel couldn't reach us because he was sick, and he told me to present this work to you. He also left me a few things to say, so I'm well prepared, right? Yeah, and I guess also that the rest of our team is watching us on Zoom, right? So, hello everybody. Hi Albin, hi Michel. Okay. And then, yeah, so I'll do my best in the next 10 minutes just to convey the thoughts of Michel, and then we'll just follow up with the questions that as we always do in here. Yes, so the topic of what we will be talking about today is the urban landform and designing multi-species territories, and I think it's a nice transition from this more, let's say, architecture-centric towards the more ecological-centric presentations. It is more of a ongoing research explanation, more of a theoretical outcome of the ECOLOPES project and new research directions. So, the urban landform constitutes a response to the mismatch between urban spatial divisions and the areas and connectivity required by the non-human species that can make up urban ecologies. And as Bruno Latour wrote in Down to Earth, it makes no sense to force the beings animating the struggling territories that constitute the terrestrial back inside the national, regional, and one might add urban boundaries, right? This goes along the lines to what we were talking about during the workshops, right? So the scale and those divisions. So a different approach is therefore needed that requires some critical rethinking. Yes, and if we look here at the approaching this question of green ecological cities from the perspective of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, it might suggest that the Sustainable Development Goal 11, yeah, the one related to the sustainable cities and communities, is the primary inroad, so that's what we want to do. But actually, it's not that the Green City project is not aiming for good health, for livable climate and adequate provisions for the non-human species that are or should be present in the green cities, right? So then if we look at the slide, which just accidentally was the first one, the United Nations 2024 report on the global progress towards the SDGs, and likewise the Eurostat report from the last 5 years, shows that we are just not doing that great with this SDG 11. Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed progress. And then the marginal progress or the regression on SDG 3, so the one related to good health and well-being, on the SDG 13, which is on the climate action, and SDG 15, life on land, could be seen, right? So then to accomplish the green and ecological cities, then we really need to link this SDG 11 to the SDG 3, this good health, the well-being, and the climate action and life on land at equal level of importance and urgency. And however, as it will be shown in the next slides, there exists a straitjacket, a kind of a silo of linked views and systems that prevent a more decisive move towards an equal level of hierarchy approach to the SDGs, right? And the first is fixed set of land use and land cover categories for which no hybrids exist. We are talking a bit about hybrids, right? And we also kind of challenged this in today's discussion, but this is more or less the status quo we have today. And urban land will always be urban land in terms of land use and land cover, no matter the number of decorative trees, since we really cannot imagine urban land use with a forest land cover. And the inherited bird's eye view of the figure ground plan makes this immediately clear, right? Where there is a black building in there cannot be a garden, or at least not in the equal terms of hierarchy. And therefore, the land cover transition from natural to agricultural to suburban and finally urban does not get challenged, and it is not necessary to acknowledge that analysis based on these quasi two-dimensional maps does not really offer a road forward. And furthermore, the preparations of sites for construction can no longer entail removal of all vegetation, soil, and in parts even rock, as this leaves none of the essential systems that make up the critical zone of our planet in which life strives and finds its necessary resources intact. So we can no longer build based on this understanding and so dense that there is like no room left for soil, for plants, and for animals. Otherwise, we'll remain stuck with at best decorative greening of leftover spaces, be these roads or balconies, as seen on this slide. Yes, and furthermore, it must be recognized that constructions currently subdivide urban land in such a manner that other species cannot exist, unless there is this kind of situation. It was during the time of COVID where actually the native species started to emerge in the cities because the human activities disappeared for this reason. Okay, so how can then the massing of the construction be rethought from the perspective of ecological connectivity? And can an inroad into the problem be cleared from the study of landform? So clearly there have been attempts to restate the relation between aspects of the natural environment and the environment as transformed by humans. Landscape urbanism approached this from the large-scale perspective by placing ecological systems and dynamics into the center of the attention. And landform buildings tried to establish a formal approach of this problem, but fell short in giving attention to critical zone systems that need to be adequately integrated. And this is also a very known example from what we saw in the project. 10 years ago, a study of ecological aspects of the Gothic Cathedral of Cologne showed actually that this very large building hosted 1,500 tons of biomass, which you couldn't really see from here, right? And maybe structural system was still doing fine with this, no? And the biomass that was hosted was ranging from a single cell organisms to moss, ferns, shrubs, and even small trees just getting stuck between the stones. And it was also a variety of bird and bat species and some small rodents, right, which inhabited simply this building. And those researchers suggested an analogy of the cathedral as geodiverse urban mountain of stone. And the researchers, this resonates with this very recent research on the relations between geodiversity and biodiversity, referred as ecodiversity. So more specifically, the hypothesis is that the geodiversity results in diverse microclimates that can support the biodiversity. And I think it's also something that resonates in the different works shown today, more this kind of architectural-centric provisions. So the different terrain features seen in natural environments have different orientations to the sun, prevailing wind, and the weather directions. And depending on the distribution of rock and soil and the resulting water regime, different plant groups can occur. Different animals can access different parts of landscapes, even those that are more extreme. Well, as you see the squirrel, they're just climbing a very vertical concrete wall. And to commence, we studied off-the-shelf landform analyses called geomorphons as a part of a GIS system to see whether it might be possible to reinvent the process to generate the landforms. And we did so by extending the available set of those terrain features with several sets that are necessary to accommodate various transitions between more standard building geometries and their surroundings. And this allowed us to eradicate the division between the building and site and to extend the ecological connectivity across the massing of buildings. And this is not only a question of planting trees, but literally also connectivity for animals in a bigger scale on the left and more of this kind of a zoom in on the right side. So this requires the ability to relate landform and its orientation to anticipated microclimates and therefore to anticipated biodiversity. And in this way, the systems of the critical zone, climate, organism, soil, rock and water can remain intact or be reinstituted in an ecologically meaningful manner. So what is required is a vision for how such 2D generation landform, no sorry, second generation landform, right? So we're trying to come up with a system for a second generation landform buildings might look like, or better, how they can be constructed. And here much can be adapted from landscape engineering methods. And this suggests also a deep hybridization of architecture and landscape architecture with, at least in a part, novel aesthetics. However, part and parcel of figuring out how this all will come together into a novel urban landform approach is to incorporate the question of landscape evolution. We typically plan and design to stabilize situations and not to promote change. So this will need to change to support these meta-level processes that are critical to sustaining the life on Earth. Okay, thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Jakub, and thank you, Michael, if he's online and can hear us, for putting together this wonderful presentation. So as before, we'll take 2.5 questions. Are there questions from the... Okay. So I will maybe start. So we started in a way with Francesca discussing more technical aspects of even defining key performance indicators for what we call an ECOLOPE. And we continued with Yasha, which talked really about the hardcore architectural challenges, also from a design perspective, what designers are required. And again, I'm asking this from an architectural point of view, so if one of the ecologists from ECOLOPES would also like to ask a question, but when we look at the idea of urban landforms and we start to connect them to form, what are the challenges and then the potential KPIs that you can connect some of the thoughts that you've developed throughout these years to the frameworks that we've developed? And if you can.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's not more of a bottom-up development, right? Which could be seen in this Landform approach, and I'm sure that Michel and the team will continue to develop this. There was this one slide which indicated that there is also a possibility to incorporate this argument on the microclimatic performance of what is being then created within those cells, right? Maybe something that didn't really foregrounded so much in this presentation was this aspect that this is still a voxel-based approach, right? So those individual, let's say, fragments of this landform are then encoded within this kind of spatial index, right? And as we had it now in the project, is also that this element also represents its soil volume, right? And then initially within this ontology framework, we also had a way to connect the available, let's say, soil depth to the plants which appear in there, right? So within this approach, you could kind of work within discrete geometries, right? Because each of those patterns has a unique name, right? And there is only a finite set of them, right? And it's already linked to its environmental performance, right? It's kind of provisions in terms of soil, and yet we also evaluated the geometric complexity of this, right? But it's still just an emerging conceptual framework, right? So it needs a lot of thinking. And if you think, or the question about the challenges, I think now to establish a formal system which is both exhaustive and complete enough to express a certain geometry, it's the challenge, right? Because if you do a kind of what they say in computational science, a brute force search, there will be a very big amount of those possible configurations, but some of them are just rotations or reflections, right? Or they kind of repeat. So it's also looking into the say computational systems where you can just work with I don't know, synonyms. So here the ontologies are quite good. Or you could do more of a more simple thing where you just try to pick one name and kind of structure the data or this system into something that could be really used. No? And then how designers would interact with the process. But I think it's just opening up a lot of things now.
I I think it's very interesting, thank you. And I think it's interesting that your group was looking at landscape architecture and landscape urbanism and infrastructures, different scales, I think, to approach also architecture.
Yeah, I think also this presentation is nice because it kind of takes us to the other scales, maybe scales which are more within the domain of ecologists, right? If I would switch, for example, to the one slide where we had the connectivity, right? It is simply a ecological analysis shown in here, right? So maybe what we are showing here as an inroad is simply a way for like the contributions of the ecologists and architects to converge in let's say a instrumental approach for which the both disciplines benefit from.
Great.
Any
other questions? Or we will continue to the last.
Maybe my answer was too long. That's also, this could be the case.
It was an answer to a lot of questions.
Yeah. All the ones that could come up. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Jakub.
Thank you very much.